Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what's recently been dubbed the income tax war. We're going to objectively look at the intense political friction unfolding across Australia right now. We'll be looking straight at the data, the rhetoric, and the rapidly shifting strategies from the major political players. It's honestly a fascinating look at how everyday economic pressure translates into high-stakes political maneuvering. Let's get to it.
To really understand this current political chessboard, we have to start with the very relatable, everyday economic struggles driving the electorate. Right now, working Australians are grappling with compounding financial pressures. Think about the cost of filling up Middle East war-ravaged petrol tanks, getting hit with a third straight interest rate rise on home loans, and just trying to pay for inflated supermarket prices. This widespread cost of living pressure is creating a massive mood of shoulder-shrugging frustration among voters. People are looking around and wondering what, if anything, can be done about decreasing services and increasing taxes. And, it's exactly this root cause that's driving a massive shift in voter sentiment.
Which brings us to some surprising new poll numbers.
Now, what's really interesting about the data here is that this economic anger has just been captured in a brand new Morgan phone poll. This was conducted right after Tuesday night's federal budget attack, which, remember, included proposed changes to negative gearing and capital gains taxes. The timing tells us that voters were reacting in real time to these economic policies, giving us a super clear snapshot of the national mood. And the sheer scale of the shift is staggering. You're reading that correctly. One Nation is polling higher than the governing Labour Party on primary votes in this specific data set. Pauline Hanson's party is sitting at 32%, compared to Labour at 28.5%. Plus, in that exact same poll, when looking at the two-party preferred metric, the coalition was sitting at 45%, compared to One Nation's 49%. Now sure, there isn't a federal election for just under 2 years, and things are definitely going to change, but numbers like these indicate instant, undeniable voter anger. It really begs the question, who is the real opposition right now?
And this brilliantly illustrates how that economic frustration is directly impacting the current leadership. When respondents were asked about the job Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was doing, a massive 59% said they are not happy. It's a clear line showing how the daily cost of living, those petrol, grocery, and mortgage pressures we just talked about, translates directly into dissatisfaction at the very top.
So let's take a look at the opposition's attack.
Naturally, a mood like this opens the door for political strategy. Spearheading the opposition's response, Angus Taylor used his budget reply speech to aggressively target Labour. Now, the Prime Minister dismissed the speech, saying Taylor offered no costings and isn't taken seriously by his own party. But the opposition leader used the moment to try and reset the Liberal Party's platform. He zeroed in on what he called accumulated waste, pointing to specific areas he claims are achieving absolutely nothing. His proposed cuts include eliminating corporate welfare, cutting housing programs that support multinationals, and removing funding for what he described as climate ideology, specifically naming the Net Zero Authority. The opposition's argument here is that these savings absolutely must be realized to prevent the sharp income tax hikes they claim Labour is proposing. Basically, they're arguing the government is running out of money and coming after the public's wallets.
This brings us to the broader political narrative, and it's essential we look at this objectively. Just notice how stark the competing rhetoric has become. On one hand, you've got the opposition characterizing the government's policies as a hard-left agenda, focused on wealth redistribution, claiming it's an attack on anyone who's worked hard to build a small nest egg, like property. Conversely, the government is firing back, warning the public that the opposition and its allies are dragging Australia further down a dangerous hard-right agenda. These competing narratives perfectly capture the intense, polarized framing both sides are actively using right now to win over a really frustrated electorate.
And the rhetoric from the opposition's camp gets even more severe. Beyond just income tax, there are expressed fears being broadcast regarding the family home. Despite clear government denials, serious concern is being voiced by critics that the family home and its current tax-free status could somehow be on the agenda. In fact, the highly charged phrase death tax is actively being thrown around. This kind of language is specifically designed to hit right at the heart of voter economic anxieties.
And that leads right into the government's counterattack.
The government and the Prime Minister's strategy team aren't just absorbing these attacks, right? They are actively counterattacking. Deeply worried about that massive surge in One Nation's poll numbers, they're launching a very specific strategic narrative. The Treasurer framed the situation by calling it the chaos that is the three-ring circus of the coalition, the Liberals, the Nationals, and One Nation. Do you see the strategy there? The government is deliberately attempting to link the Liberal Party directly to One Nation, grouping them all together as competing factions of a chaotic, hard-right circus.
This counterattack really gets down to specific policies. We're seeing what amounts to a labor scare campaign aimed squarely at the coalition ahead of the next election. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke is leading this charge by targeting a specific policy Angus Taylor floated, which would limit non-citizens from accessing benefits like the NDIS and childcare payments. Burke is utilizing this specific policy point to further enforce that link between Taylor and One Nation.
And this brings us to a rather sharp political barb that gives us a real taste of the intense political theatre happening right now. Responding to Taylor's policy on citizen benefits, Tony Burke said, "It would be fair to say, I think, that the one permanent resident that Angus Taylor seems happy with is Pauline Hanson, who's a permanent resident in his head." It's a highly calculated quote, designed entirely to cement the narrative that the Liberal leadership's strategies are entangled with, or maybe even just reacting to, One Nation's growing influence.
Ultimately, we're seeing a massive disruption of traditional politics.
Stepping back for a second, the major takeaway is that traditional two-party battle lines have been massively disrupted by this sudden polling surge of One Nation. For a long time, the political chessboard in Australia was fairly clearly defined. You had the Liberal and National Coalition on one side and Labor and the Greens on the other. But those days have essentially been blown up, driven by that grassroots cost of living frustration we started with. Let's map out how fast this momentum shifted. It all kicked off with Tuesday's budget, which immediately triggered the Morgan poll surge showing One Nation jumping ahead. This was quickly followed by the budget reply speech, where the opposition tried to regain footing, which then sparked the government's counterattacks. And looking ahead on this timeline, the next major testing ground for this completely shifted political landscape is the Victorian state election, which is just 6 months away. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. The battle lines are drawn, but the combatants in their positions have fundamentally shifted. With the traditional two-party dominance disrupted and a populace highly motivated by economic stress, how will this unpredictable new dynamic actually impact the next election? As the analysis rightly points out, watch this space. The political chessboard is moving incredibly fast, and the ultimate outcome is absolutely anyone's guess. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope this breakdown gave you a much clearer view of the forces at play. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.